Hello and welcome to the Odds On Favorites podcast, where we're talking sports, entertainment, all with an eye on the bottom line. Drew Goldfarb, joined by Rick Rockwell and Taylor Smith. We jump right in with news and notes, where we're taking a closer look at the biggest news of the week. This week, we'll start with the NBA. We're recording this podcast the morning of Game 6 between the Warriors and the Raptors. If Toronto wins, the series is over. If Golden State wins, Game 7 will be this Sunday in Toronto. You know the answer to that. We don't. Taylor, I'm going to let you brag a little bit here because you're the only one of the three of us, as far as I recall, that even gave the Raptors a chance before this series started. So get a little bit of gloating in and let some viewers say that you jinxed the Raptors, I guess, for Game 6.
Yeah, I don't want to take a victory lap right now because there's still a lot that can go wrong. This is still Toronto. As we've seen in recent years, they're not a sure thing ever when it comes to the playoffs. I still think they win the series. I wouldn't be surprised if they win Game 6. Obviously, they've taken both games at Oracle to this point. And I thought they had Game 5 in the bag. They were up by 6 with like 3 minutes left. Place was rocking. Kawhi was just making everything. And then they took a timeout. And it all went downhill from there. But it still took kind of a miraculous comeback. Not miraculous, but it still took a comeback. And the Warriors made 23s in Game 5. Toronto made 8. And they still won by 1 point. It wasn't the most clean game from Toronto. We've seen them play far better. I don't think it'll take a perfect game from the Raptors in either Game 6 or 7 to win. The Durant thing matters. They won the game basically thanks to him playing 12 minutes in Game 5. So without him, that's obviously a big hit. Toronto's been the better team on the balance of the entire series, and I think they get it done.
Rick, any thoughts you want to add?
You know, like I've been saying, until you actually beat the champion, until you actually close them out, it's one thing to get a lead in a series. It's another thing to close them out. And right now we're seeing Toronto have a problem closing them out. I mean, Golden State lost Kevin Durant in that game and still was able to emotionally and mentally overcome that. They played an ugly game. I haven't seen them play that sloppy on offense in a long time. Just the ball handling, the turnovers, it just seemed like they were in disarray for good chunks of the game at a time. Boogie gave them some key minutes. Durant obviously did as well, but Boogie came in the second half and specifically in the fourth quarter also. He played some solid minutes for them. I think if he plays that again, like that again this week or this game, I think they're going to win it again. I'm still giving them the edge at home. You saw the heart of a champion at the end of that game. Curry and Klay Thompson were just dropping the threes on them, just pulling up, taking shots, making plays. And if both of them are healthy, if both of them are, hitting their shots, at least a good percentage of them, it's hard for me to see Toronto beating them. Toronto has probably the better overall talent now because Durant's gone. They have the best player in Leonard. They got a good support system around him. They've got a good team. Like, they've made me a believer that they have a team better than just one man. But still, you have to beat man to be the man. And I'm not sold on them being the man yet. I still think Golden State has a shot at coming back and winning this series. It starts with this game at home. I think they're going to get it, and then anything can happen Game 7.
Yeah, I think that's credit to Taylor because I think that Rick, you and I were both saying that the series was probably over in 5, Golden State winning. So, Taylor, you get some credit regardless of the outcome of the series, just for saying that Toronto was going to be in it. But, yeah, it's Game 6, also the last game at the Oracle Arena for Golden State before they moved to San Francisco in the fall. It'll be interesting. Everybody who's watching this has already seen the outcome of Game 6, but yeah, it's interesting because they had Durant and he certainly helped, and Toronto did outscore Golden State after Durant left the game, but Golden State came back from being down 6 without Durant, so in the late in the fourth quarter, so. It is interesting. I do think that I have a lot more respect for the Raptors than I did at the start of this series or the start of the playoffs for sure. They're a very talented team. Kawhi Leonard is outstanding. So it wouldn't shock me if Toronto were able to win the series in 6 or in 7, but I still think that, like Rick said, it's to be the man, you got to beat the man, and it's woo. Golden State, it won't be out of it until they're eliminated. More so than any other team, I think, in the NBA, on par with the Patriots, essentially. The French Open is in the books. Rafael Nadal pick up the win on the men's side. Ashley Barty winning on the women's side. Novak Djokovic ended up falling in the semis for the men, losing to Dominic Thiem and taking away a chance for a Nadal-Djokovic final. Rick, how disappointed did that make you?
That was actually pretty disappointing, because not that it was disappointing that Djokovic lost, because I even said, whether it was on the show or in my preview article, that he had the toughest road to get there. Thiem is the second best clay court player in tennis, in men's tennis at least. And he was ranked number 4 in the world. So you got your top 4 guys in the semifinals. And even before they got to that point, when I wrote my article before the French Open started, I said it was going to be the top 4. And I said there is a chance that Thiem could beat Djokovic, because if he's on top of his game, Dominic is the second best clay court player behind Nadal. With that said, it's disappointing because we could have had another epic matchup between Nadal and Djokovic, which is the best rivalry in tennis. I said that either last week or the week before. These two guys have played against each other over 50 times. And when you can put them together in a Grand Slam final, you add that scene, that environment, that whole storyline to it, that's like a Hollywood movie right there. It's a script that keeps going. I feel like we got cheated a little bit, because after that, nobody thought Dominic was going to beat Nadal, because he hasn't beaten Nadal in a Grand Slam. Okay? Djokovic is the only guy that had a legitimate chance at beating Nadal, because he's done it before in a Grand Slam, but he still had to get past his big hurdle. Nadal had everything set up for him to get to the finals. He had the easier path. I said that in the beginning. He had an easier path, and he just cruised through it. He's a whole nother player at the French Open than he is on other surfaces, even though he's still really good on other surfaces. But you put him on clay, and it's like he's a master. He goes from being great to being the master. So, yeah, it was a little bit disappointed. But on the women's side, it pretty much – the unexpected of who won was pretty much kind of what I was trying to say. You can't go with the favorites for the women in the French Open, because it's the French Open. They fall like that, and that's exactly what happened. You had women falling in the second round, first round, third round, quarterfinals. You didn't even get – you had Halep lose in the semifinals, the quarterfinals to a 17-year-old. It was like everything that could go crazy for the women's side went crazy. But that's the excitement of it on the women. You know what you're getting on the men, but the excitement for the women is you don't know what you're getting. What you think could happen, just throw it out the window, because it's not going to happen. You're going to get upsets. You're going to see women who should win it fall early in the tournament. Then you're going to get women who weren't expected to even get far become another superstar in the sport. That's what's great about the French Open for the women. But we did get a little cheated on the men's side. It is a little disappointing. So now we just got to wait to Wimbledon, where it's going to be actually, it's going to be Djokovic versus the world. Just like Nadal with the French. Djokovic has been the man at Wimbledon. Federer will have a better chance at Wimbledon. And we'll see a kind of different outcome in that regard than Nadal just storming to his 12th title. And, they're going to name the court after him. They might even change the Grand Slam title to his name. Because what he's done is incredible.
It does feel like just fait accompli whenever he's healthy, and around the time of the French Open, it's like, well, he's going to be a huge betting favorite. He was a minus favorite for this, I think, from the start, which is, in an individual sport, that's pretty unusual. You see NASCAR odds, the leader's like plus 500, something like that. Golf plus 800 or so. So if a guy's a minus favorite entering a tournament in tennis, it's pretty incredible. I guess it's a little disappointing that he didn't face Djokovic, because it's fun to see the best go up against the best, but he was probably going to win anyway. So we got the result we expected.
Yeah, it would have been great to see another matchup like that, but geez, what Nadal has done, what he's accomplished in that tournament in his career, it's just rename the whole tournament after him when he retires.
Pretty much.
It's the it's the tournament to determine who would have lost to Rafael Nadal after he retires. That'll be what the French Open becomes.
Well, I think Dominic Thiem will pick up where Nadal leaves off if Nadal retires or declines in the next couple of years, because he's still young enough to take that mantle, and he's the second best clay court player right now. There's nobody else close to Nadal on clay, but Dominic is probably the closest.
We'll keep that in mind and revisit that in about 4 or 5 years when we can actually determine if he has tried to kind of picked up the mantle a little bit. And we can keep that in mind for either to give you some praise off the top or for like a whoops in 2025, if that works.
Yeah, hopefully this video ages well.
The U.S. Open golf tournament got underway only a couple of hours prior to our recording this podcast, the third major of the year, with the PGA Championship winner Brooks Koepka as the back-to-back reigning tournament champion. Taylor, you and I previewed this tournament earlier this week. You can find that video on the Odds On Favorites YouTube channel. So why don't you get us started here, just taking a closer look at the U.S. Open?
I just have a hard time going against Koepka right now. He won the PGA last month. He finished second at the Masters. He's a back-to-back U.S. Open champion, obviously not at the same course. This year it's at Pebble Beach. Phil Mickelson, I think I said in our video earlier that at plus 5,000, he's kind of an interesting long shot. He's won at Pebble Beach 5 times in the past, including this past February at the Pro-Am. So if you want a long shot, I think Mickelson's viable. It's not an overly appealing bet because he's 48, and the average U.S. Open champion, I think, is 21 years younger than that. So it's not a particularly likely bet, but it's not impossible given his familiarity with the course. I think Tiger Woods is a bit of a trap at plus 1,200. He's always a little bit overpriced, in my opinion, just because he's Tiger Woods. He attracts a lot of interest naturally just because of that. He has a chance, but his track record here is not the greatest. It's not Augusta for him. So Koepka opened at plus 850, which was right behind Dustin Johnson and Rory McIlroy plus 800 apiece. I would still side with Koepka there just because he's been in better form. He's the best golfer in the world right now. So as I usually say, if you can get a favorite at plus 850 like that, long odds, even longer than some others, that's always a bet I'm willing to take. So I'm with Koepka again. I'm just going to keep going back to the well until he fails me, and so far so good.
Rick, I know how excited you are to talk golf yet again. So, if you could limit to 40, 50 minutes here, because I know how much you just want to go on and on about, whether you take Tiger or lefty, or if you want to go with Koepka,
I hope Tiger doesn't even make the cut. I just hope an alligator accident or something. I can't stand Tiger Woods. I'm glad he's not the favorite. Back to that well again. Where's Happy Gilmore listed on these odds? Is he up near the top?
Adam Sandler's probably overseas somewhere with all of his buddies shooting like grown-ups 12. So
can I take Tony Romo for this tournament? I'd rather take him than anybody. Taylor's argument makes a lot of sense to me, especially as someone that can't stand golf. But Koepka, like you said, has been playing consistently well compared to some of the other top names. And it's hard, and like with other sports, if someone has that kind of momentum, that kind of consistency going, and then gives you that kind of betting value on top of it, it's your guys' Joey Logano argument, which is my Joey Logano argument, because I always say he's always top 5 no matter what. He's the silent assassin. Koepka fits that argument. He gives you that example right there. It's hard to argue against that. So I'm going to get my Koepka poster out again. I'm going to put it up on the wall. I'm going to be rooting for him this week. I'm going to be so excited for this tournament. That's what I'm going with. Tony Romo.
So one for Romo and one for Koepka, and I agree with the logic with Taylor across the board on it. Koepka, when you can get the guy who's been the best golfer in the world, and he's not even technically the absolute betting favorite, you get slightly better odds than that. It's almost a no-brainer at that point. And Mickelson's a decent play, because if you're getting a 50 to 1 payout on a guy with that kind of name recognition, with that kind of history at Pebble Beach, that's a good option. I'd go Koepka, and also because he and I went to the same university, the Florida State University. So, got to support my Noles this weekend in college baseball as well. So that'll be interesting. But we're not going to make you, Rick, talk College World Series. At least not right now. May just throw that in later just to see how he reacts. But since golf is a topic that Rick's not a fan of, let's do one that he does like. Chris Froome is out of the Tour de France. So Rick Froome, that's why he's here. So Rick, how does that impact the betting odds for this race, as Taylor and I will nod and agree with you?
First of all, Chris Froome is my favorite cyclist. Like I've said this many times over the last couple of years. I love him as a professional cyclist because he's not this arrogant, brash athlete like some other cyclists might be, or even in other sports. He's a machine. He gets on the bike. He can sprint. He can do time trials, and he can climb in the mountains. He proved being a team player when he helped Wiggins win his Tour de France. He's proved being a team player when he wasn't the best on his team last year, and he helped Geraint Thomas win the Tour de France. This guy doesn't have that kind of ego, and I love that about him. This is huge. Froome's accident was serious. It would be like the equivalent of Lance Armstrong in his prime getting injured and missing a Tour de France. It's bigger news than what's going on with Kevin Durant. Unfortunately, it's cycling and it's not NBA. And this is serious because Froome is going to become one of the greatest of the sport. He's not just like racing to win a Tour de France for the first time. He's going to tie the record for 5 Tour de Frances this summer. He was in the Criterium du Dauphiné where if he won this, which he was one of the favorites, he would have set the all-time record for most wins for this race too. This was the summer of history for Chris Froome. He's won every major cycling race since he's been a professional, since he's reached the top of the sport. His loss is going to be a shadow over the Tour de France. It's already changed the betting odds. He was the betting favorite. Now he's out. And now it opens up the field for Geraint Thomas again and other people like Quintana or one of the Yates brothers or Nibali or one of these other names that continuously fall to Chris Froome. This is huge. His accident, he's still in intensive care with the last report I read. Broke his leg, has sustained several other injuries. Like it was, as they described, there's crashes and then there's bad crashes. This was a bad crash. And it was on basically a practice run. It wasn't even in the race. They were scouting out the stage. They were getting warmed up for the time trial. They were doing what they're supposed to be doing to prepare. And he had a terrible accident. This is huge sport. And unfortunately in America, it's not going to register as much because cycling is not as into the mainstream for sports fans and stuff. But overseas and for cycling fans who follow the sport like I do and who know more than I do, this is massive. This is huge. This is almost the equivalent of like LeBron James missing a year of NBA. Like that's how big this is. It can't be stated enough how big it is. It's changed the entire betting landscape for the Tour de France now because he's out. He was the favorite. Heading into it, he was the betting favorite. Every future bet you could see throughout this year, 9 times out of 10, Froome was the betting favorite. So it opens the door up for his teammate, Geraint Thomas, to win a second Tour de France. We'll see if that happens or not. They still have the strongest team even without Froome. So Egan Bernal will step up. He's the future of cycling. His future could be now with Froome out. Bottom line, you just taken one of the greatest cyclists in the history of the sport and just removed him from the biggest race in the sport when he was chasing history. That's why this is a huge ordeal.
I just saw Phil Mickelson hit one into the sand, so I think it's time to talk hockey.
Well, let's just move right along and wrap up the Stanley Cup playoffs. The Blues won the Stanley Cup Wednesday night with a 4-1 win over Boston in Game 7 in Boston. The game and the series was correctly predicted by me. So while I sit here doing my Jeremy Clarkson smug face, all correct, let's get Taylor to start us off with a recap for a wild NHL postseason.
This was pretty much the perfect way for this entire playoff run to end. The road team not dominating, but the scoreline is a dominant win for St. Louis. You go home with the chance to win the Stanley Cup. You get blown out on your home ice, and then you go to Boston and blow them out on their home ice. So that's pretty logical considering how wild everything's been to this point. St. Louis is definitely a worthy champion. We saw just Binnington completely dominated last night, 32 saves. Tuukka Rask not quite up to the challenge. He let 4 in, 16 saves. We saw Rask was great in Game 6, but not so much in Game 7, and that pretty much wound up being the deciding factor. And congrats to St. Louis on their first championship. You can now get a drink in St. Louis because they do have a cup.
I agree with what Taylor was saying. St. Louis going on the road to win Game 7 the way they won, 4-1, having arguably going into the series the best goaltender in the series. Rask was a better goaltender, or at least most people would argue he's the better goaltender. And for him to have the struggles he had in Game 7 at home was shocking. Giving up 4 goals at home to clinch the Stanley Cup, to win it. Nobody predicted that. It'd be one thing if, like, St. Louis won 3-2 or something like that, but nobody was saying, yes, St. Louis is going to go in there and they're going to dominate Rask and they're going to make him look terrible, like he's not the best goalie in the playoffs. With that said, Taylor is right also. St. Louis earned it with the way they played, with the way they fought back. You can't discount anything they did winning Game 7 on the road. And it was, like Taylor also said, the perfect example of how this whole postseason was. It was chaos. No matter who you were confident in the beginning, you did not have confidence the whole way. Teams were upset, swept. Things happened that you didn't think were going to happen with advancements into the next round. It was crazy. It was one of the craziest NHL postseasons that I can recall. It was one of the craziest postseasons for any sport that I can recall. That's what made it fun. That's what made it exciting. And even though I'm not a fan of St. Louis or Boston, they gave us the exclamation point to an incredibly fun postseason.
Yeah, it was a wild ride the whole way through, with all of the wild card teams advancing over all of the top seeds in the first round, and you had Carolina make it to the Eastern Conference Finals after sweeping the New York Islanders in round 2. St. Louis was a team that before the postseason started, I had picked in my NHL bracket challenge to make it to the Stanley Cup final and lose to Tampa. Tampa didn't win a game in the playoffs, but that's just the way that this postseason went. There's a reason the NHL restarted that after round 1. They opened it up for a second set of picks. St. Louis had an unbelievable run. Jordan Binnington as a rookie, totally unreal. It has to be the best rookie performance for a goaltender. At least, he's the first rookie goalie in NHL history to win 16 playoff games in a single year. The last one I can recall that had like a crazy rookie season run was Cam Ward with Carolina. That was an outstanding run as well, but I think Binnington's was better. I will come to Rask's defense a bit for Game 7. He faced basically no shots in the first period and gave up 2 goals. The first was on a tip and a redirect in front on a Jay Bouwmeester shot that got redirected 2 feet in front of him and changed from going high to the chest to going basically between his legs. And the other is entirely Brad Marchand's fault. And it brings a smile to my face to say that because it couldn't happen to a worse guy. But anyway, if he was on my favorite team, he'd be my favorite player. There's a reason he's called the Rat. Marchand went for a line change with 10 seconds left in the period, and ended up giving up an odd man rush to St. Louis, which they scored on. I'm not going to put that goal on Rask. I'm going to put that one on 63. And when you come down to it later on in the game, it's, you add an empty netter. So I don't think that was a terrible performance by Rask. I do think that he could have had a better performance. Binnington clearly had the better performance of the two by far. But I don't think Rask's performance was bad. But amazing run for the Blues. I don't think that there was a single player. Maybe there was one player on the team that had ever won a cup before, which is unreal, especially considering the team that they beat with the Stanley Cup rings cumulatively between all of the players on that team. Unbelievable, outstanding, and smile from me making that pick. No whoops for me on that series.
Boston lost, so I think we're all happy here.
Yeah. Let's go to where's your money going? Taylor, what draws your attention this week now that the NHL Stanley Cup playoffs are done and the NBA Finals has one game tonight, maybe two left in the series?
There's a lot of soccer going on right now. We have the Women's World Cup. The Copa America starts soon, but the Gold Cup is the CONCACAF, tournament that starts. The U.S. is playing. They're plus 140. They're the second favorites to win, right behind Mexico at plus 135. And then you get into long odds, Costa Rica plus 550, everyone else at plus 1,200 or higher. As much as this pains me, I think Mexico is the pretty clear favorite here. The U.S. has been terrible lately. They got crushed by Venezuela the other night. They lost to Jamaica a few days before that. Greg Berhalter, the new coach, has not really shown that he's capable of leading this thing forward. It's been a disastrous 3-4 years for the U.S. Obviously, a Gold Cup win would be nice, but based on their recent form, I don't have any confidence in them. I think plus 40, the odds aren't favorable enough for me to take that bet. Mexico's a more talented side. They were in the World Cup last year. We were not. So, it's a top-heavy tournament. There are clear-cut favorites, but I think Mexico at plus 135 is a more likely bet to win. So that's where my money's going this week.
Rick, how about you? Where's your money going?
With no NASCAR, no UFC,
U.S. Open.
Yeah, it's rather disappointing. Froome's out of the Dauphiné. Like, it's kind of hard right now to feel really comfortable going somewhere with my money. With that said, after looking over the betting landscape, I do feel rather confident in some fights for Bellator 222. And I don't want to go into great detail because I know we're going to talk a little bit more about it later. But I do believe, and I talked about it a little bit on our This Week in Combat Sports video that we shoot every week. I do think there's some potential betting value there and some fights that are worth placing your money on. So for me, that's where I'm heading this week.
No spread and butter, so let's go to Give Me Props, where we look at some prop bets that caught our eye this week. Let's actually begin this week by looking back at a prop bet that has recently paid off. Robert Pattinson was announced as the actor that will be portraying Bruce Wayne and Batman in the upcoming film The Batman, replacing Ben Affleck in the role. This was a long-anticipated prop bet. So, Taylor, how did you do on this one?
I didn't know we were doing whoops already, but needless to say, I didn't get Robert Pattinson to play Batman. I don't think it's a bad idea, just because he's a good actor, and people thought Heath Ledger was a weird choice to play the Joker, and that turned out pretty well. I don't have faith that this movie's going to be good. The last Batman movie I didn't think was very good, with Superman going to the Congress and all that stuff, but obviously he wasn't even listed with odds, but Rick did an article about this last fall, and he said that the field at plus 650 was a good bet. So he was right. I do want to quote one thing. He broke down a list of actors that were candidates for the role. Under Jake Gyllenhaal, it says he's just a smaller version of Ben Affleck. And I thought that was funny. So, yeah, I didn't get Robert Pattinson, but I don't think I'm alone on that.
Deep dive for Taylor.
Well, Taylor, first of all, thank you for pointing out that I got this right.
I mean, kind of.
What's that?
You kind of got it right.
Well, I said the field. I went right with the field. I analyzed every option we had for this bet. I meticulously looked through every actor. I scoured through their acting careers. Being a Batman fan that I am, I lined it all up. And I realized there was nobody on that list that was going to be Batman, even though there was some that I would have liked to see as Batman. They had Hopper, I thought would have been a nice long shot pick to be Batman because he has the build, the frame. He's a good actor. He's developed over the years. He was last seen on Black Sails as one of the main characters. I thought he had a chance. Somewhere along the line, someone brought up Negan from Walking Dead, Jeffrey Dean Morgan. I would have loved to see him as Batman. I put in that article, I said, in a perfect world, in at least my perfect world, getting a shot or a chance of seeing him as Batman would have been phenomenal. I would rather have him than Ben Affleck or Mr. Twilight over here that they just picked. So now let me get to that. First of all, Ben Affleck was the worst Batman. And I've been saying it for a long time. A lot of people have been saying it.
George Clooney.
No, Clooney at least embodies what Bruce Wayne is. Ben Affleck doesn't embody anything. He's not a good Bruce Wayne, and he's not a good Batman. He's neither. He should have been
Kilmer?
What's that?
Val Kilmer?
Val Kilmer at least was still a good Bruce Wayne.
Val Kilmer was a good Batman.
Not good Bruce Wayne. He's not a good anything. Ben Affleck's not a good anything. Oh, he's not a bad director, but he's not good at Batman. He was terrible. And so what did Warner Brothers do? They went out and found the worst actor they could get to make us want Ben Affleck back. That's what they did. They made us think, hey, you know what? We're going to prove you guys wrong. Ben Affleck was a good pick. He was a good choice because look who we got now. We got Mr. Twilight. Seriously, this is terrible. When I saw this, my head exploded. I could not believe it. I was like, how are you going to pick somebody like this to play such an iconic role when you already dropped the ball with Ben Affleck? You don't just go pick, roll the dice and think, well, we're going to take a shot here. Maybe he could be a good Batman. He's not like Christian Bale. Christian Bale had at least some roles that attracted people from different genres, different audiences and stuff, both men and women. This guy, Mr. Twilight, is only going to attract teeny boppers. This is ridiculous. Like, preteen girls and middle-aged women are going to be the only one that want to see this Batman now. They've ruined it for the rest of us. This is terrible. As for this bet, now that I got that off my chest, you had to go with the field here because the options that they gave us, other than Ben Affleck, there really wasn't anybody legitimate on that list that would play Batman. Kit Harington, Jon Snow, I thought he had a chance. He could have been a decent Batman. He could have at least given us something that this guy wasn't going to give us, but he ruled that out last year. So now Warner Brothers goes and they dig up somebody that half the American male population don't even care about, can't even name one movie other than Twilight that he's been in. Like, it's just ridiculous. You know who I blame besides Warner Brothers? I blame Christian Bale. He should have stayed as Batman and not left and come back and saved us, and it's ridiculous. And this isn't like Heath Ledger, because at least Heath Ledger was a good actor. Yes, it was weird picking him to play the Joker, I agree, because he's coming off playing a gay cowboy, and you're like, how's he going to go from a cowboy to the Joker, one of the most iconic villains of all time? He blew everybody's mind with how phenomenal of a job he did, proving what a great actor he was. Mr. Twilight, he's not a great actor. I can't stand this. It makes me sick to my stomach.
I really hope this movie is amazing just to see the whoops.
Yeah.
The thing is that, so it is a different position when you had Heath Ledger being selected to be the Joker and everybody was going, oh, this is going to be ridiculous, this is awful. But the thing is that what you brought up about Pattinson, about his background in the movies that he's most popular for, Ledger's most popular movies before The Dark Knight were, I would imagine, are the, what was it, 10 Things I Hate About You, or how, whatever it was, or something. There was, it wasn't a fan, it wasn't my genre. But his most popular movie was the one where he was the high school kid and he's singing on the bleachers. I don't remember the name of the movie, but
then it's not that popular.
It's not my genre. It's like if you try to ask me to name one of the Twilight movies, other than saying it's the Twilight movies, I couldn't do that.
Exactly. You're making my point.
No, but what I'm saying is that
from preteen genre and making them Batman.
But Ledger was also
Robin. He could play Robin. Let him play Robin. He's a Robin. He's not a Batman.
Ledger was also in a lot of those movies. That was his.
He's with Mel Gibson, though.
Okay, I'm sure that Pattinson has done something. I've never followed his career, but that's the way that it goes. So here's the thing with this. It is what it is on the pick. Congratulations to Rick on being so thrilled with being correct on his wager. For me, I was a huge fan, obviously, as everybody was, of the Dark Knight series. I basically hold judgment on any actor playing Batman until I've seen it. But, you know, I did the same thing with Christian Bale because even after Batman Begins, he was not my favorite Batman. And it's my favorite part of Batman's movie history. But Michael Keaton is the Batman I grew up on, and those first two movies are still among the best, probably among at least the top 4 Batman movies ever made are the Michael Keaton movies, with The Dark Knight and Batman Begins being up there. Now I bring him up again because when they brought in Ben Affleck, the idea was that it was going to be a more grizzled, older Batman. And with the resurgence that Keaton has had in the last 10 years, that would have been really interesting to me. I don't know if
Keaton would be better as Batman.
I don't know if because I'm not as much of a comic book person as I am. I've seen the movies and enjoyed them, but I'm sure there's a story arc that they could have played off of where it's an older Bruce Wayne kind of coming out of retirement sort of thing. Michael Keaton, especially if you open him up, if you remember from the original Batman movie how dark that was able to be, Batman Returns had to lighten up a bit. Although still, that was the first Batman movie I ever saw, so it's still going to hold a special place for me. But that would have been really interesting to let him go with a PG-13, like a hard PG-13 rating. Let him be dark, however he wants to play it. Let him take his Batman from 1990 and portray him as he existed 30 years later. That would have been really interesting to me. Essentially a 30-year later sequel to Batman Returns, I think would have been really cool. But it's a Batman movie. I'm going to be interested to kind of see it, whether I see it in a theater or on DVD, Blu-ray, on demand, whatever, the way I did with Batman v Superman, remains to be seen. But, we'll see. We'll see. Ledger was a pick everybody hated, and it turned out to be like the greatest casting choice that has ever been made in a Batman movie. So, and most of his career, and I'm going to just have to look this up and I'll message it to you later. And if I remember to bring it up next week, I will. But a lot of Ledger's career before The Dark Knight was in movies geared towards teenagers.
He played a knight. He played in the American Revolution.
That was a teenager movie. I saw that in middle school.
He had manly characters.
But I mean, technically being a vampire. This is
going to be like Jared Leto as the Joker. Like, this is going to be a flop. It's going to be a failure. It's terrible.
See, Jared Leto, I think that if they had if they hadn't hamstrung him as much with the script, I think that and all of the edits, I think it would have had more promise. Because Leto is, I'm a big 30 Seconds to Mars fan, and the movies he shows up in, he always does a really great job because he gets into it the way Christian Bale does, and with that method, like just crazy into it. Both of them, by the way, in American Psycho, fantastic film. Let's go back to the NBA though, because otherwise we're going to end up talking about Robert Pattinson and Batman for an hour. This time we're focusing on Kevin Durant. Really unfortunate to see him get injured the way he did in Game 5 in Toronto. Likely marks the end of his tenure with the Golden State Warriors. Suffered a ruptured Achilles tendon and underwent surgery this week to repair it. Time frame for recovery from this type of surgery, typically in the 8 to 12-month range, meaning he's out for at least most of next season and very possibly until the start of the 2020-21 season. And even still, he's likely to be a heavily sought-after free agent this summer. Betting favorite team to sign him is the New York Knicks, followed by the Golden State Warriors, and long shots include Dallas and Oklahoma City. What do you think Durant does this summer, Rick?
I think based on the injury, it would be smart if he worked out a long-term deal with Golden State because they know what they got with him, and they probably would be a little bit sympathetic based on the situation that's going on, that's happening. The whole injury thing just irks me, okay? Listen, Chris Froome's injury is bigger in the landscape of sports, yet Kevin Durant's injury, they want to make into some big emotional, heartbreaking story where a guy comes back to try and help his team win a championship and he gets hurt in the process. That happened all the time in the 60s and 70s, and even in NHL it still happens. They lose teeth. They get cut open. They go get stitches, come back out and play. This sporting world has become so sissified that it's gotten to the point where people are just blowing it out of proportion and a guy gets hurt playing basketball and it's the end of the world. Okay? Now that I got that off my chest, It's going to come down to Golden State or the Knicks, in my opinion. I think the Knicks will take a chance on him because he's still a superstar, and they want a superstar, and he would attract other superstars. And maybe they can even get a discount based on injury. Who knows what's going to happen in terms of that financial aspect of it. He's still going to make a boatload of money wherever he goes. People are still going to take a chance on him because of who he is. I don't see this injury preventing him from being a great player again. I think he's still young enough to where he can overcome this and get back up to the top of the sport, or at least top 10 players in the league. It just depends which team he plays on. I think he should stay with Golden State, but I would not be surprised if he ends up with the Knicks.
So he has the ability to opt into his contract next season with Golden State. It would pay him $32+ million to largely rehab and then give free agency a go next season. If he doesn't think he can play next year, I think there's a chance he can play next season. The Achilles injury, we've seen different timetables for different players. DeMarcus Cousins missed, I think, 357 days, whereas Kobe Bryant, I think, missed 240 days. And if Durant is more on the Kobe end of that, that would bring him back by February to March next season. So there's a chance he plays. I don't think the injury will negatively affect his free agent market if he does decide to opt out. I think the Knicks and the Nets are teams that would still pay him the max, even knowing the injury is a risk. But, Cousins has not been the same since the injury, but it's also unfair to really know. We don't really know what he is yet. We've seen a lot of players suffer this injury and not come back quite the same. Durant is 30. He's fairly young still. Very young, but fairly young as a basketball player. I think he can come back from it. I don't think it'll temper his market. I think Brooklyn is the most likely destination. We just saw Brooklyn open up a second max slot with their trade last week of Allen Crabbe to Atlanta. We just saw yesterday Kyrie Irving fired his agent and signed on with Rock Nation, which is the Jay-Z agency that also represents Kevin Durant. The rumors recently have been that Kyrie is more interested in Brooklyn than New York. And the rumors since the All-Star break has been that Durant and Kyrie are planning on teaming up. So if Kyrie has his eye on Brooklyn, I imagine if KD leaves Golden State that he's also interested in Brooklyn. At BetOnline, you can get the Nets at plus 1,000 to sign Durant, whereas the Knicks are plus 150. I would just take the long shot there with Brooklyn. They're a more competent basketball organization right now. It's like the Clippers and the Lakers. The Clippers are the smart team. They're kind of the up-and-comer. The Lakers are the more established basketball franchise historically. The Knicks and Nets are the same way. The Knicks are a dumpster fire. I don't see why he'd want to go there. The Nets are in the same town. They have a better roster in place. If he can join Kyrie there, I think it's likely. So Brooklyn at plus 1,000, I think, is my favorite bet.
I also like that. And the one thing I'm going to add to this whole thing is obviously with him missing as much time as he's going to, if he's out until basically at least the trade deadline next year and possibly until the start of the following season, if he's leaving Golden State, because that being able to re-up for the year may make sense, he's going to end up – I think the teams that are going to be most interested in him are the teams that are not going to be competing for trying to put themselves over the top for next year. It's going to be teams that are either going to have a number of draft picks or are going to basically be looking forward to the 2020-2021 season. Brooklyn has a young core and picks at number 17 and 27 this year. If you basically were to be able to bring Durant in and know that those two draft picks are going to have a year of experience and the young core is going to be another year older, and you're going to have probably a pretty good first-round pick the next year if you don't, if Durant can't play, at least in the top 20. Plus 1,000 odds sounds great on that. The Knicks, I think it comes down to what we're going to get into in a second, which is what happens with Anthony Davis. Because the one thing I could see is, if they were to go into this summer the way they are, and not end up with the first overall pick, which they didn't get, Anthony Davis, who they want to trade for, or signing Kevin Durant. How do they just close up the franchise? What do you do at that point? But yeah, the Knicks, Nets, are the 1 and 2 in most cap space going into this summer, followed by the Clippers, who I don't really see it with them. They don't have a first-round draft pick this year either, which is one of the things I was looking through. Dallas is 4th. They're technically available at plus 2,500 from Bovada. Also no first-round draft picks. The Pacers and then the Lakers, who pick at 4th and come in at plus 1,000. But with LeBron, I don't think they're looking for 2 years from now. I think they're looking at next.
Nope.
They're also one of the favorites to the topic we're going to now, because another NBA movement bet, this time focusing on Anthony Davis. New Orleans Pelicans star seems likely to be traded at some point this summer, with the most likely destinations being either the Los Angeles Lakers or the Boston Celtics. Taylor, your thoughts on where he will end up playing opening day for this fall?
So his representation has been adamant that even if the Celtics trade for him, he will not sign a long-term deal there, but obviously that doesn't matter for this bet. Brooklyn and the Lakers, as of yesterday, are the front runners to get him. They've both reportedly been talking to New Orleans. I think if Boston offers the right package, they have an advantage. I think, Jason Tatum is not a perfect prospect, but he's a better prospect than anyone the Lakers can offer. And I do wonder if trading for Davis prior to the draft would give Boston a better chance at keeping Kyrie Irving. I imagine playing with Anthony Davis is pretty alluring. So I think Boston has impetus to do that as soon as possible to try and lure Kyrie back if they want him back. The Lakers have been trying to get him for months. Magic was trying to get him. He's gone, fortunately for the Lakers. They've reportedly been talking about Brandon Ingram, who has an injury red flag with the blood clots, but apparently he's going to be fine. Lonzo Ball. I've seen that Kyle Kuzma is a sticking point. I don't know for which team, but I can't imagine Kyle Kuzma being a sticking point for either team in an Anthony Davis trade. He's a fine player, but he's 2 years younger than Anthony Davis. I just think you part ways with Kyle Kuzma in a second if you're getting Anthony Davis. And if you're the Pelicans, I don't think getting Kyle Kuzma is something that should be a huge priority either. But if Boston wants him, I think they should be able to get him. Tatum, Jaylen Brown, Gordon Hayward, I imagine, would have to be in the trade for money purposes. I don't know what Gordon Hayward is at this point, but New Orleans could theoretically use a guy like that if they want to remain competitive in the interim with Zion Williamson coming in. But it's going to be one of those teams. I think the Lakers are probably more likely just because that's where he wants to go. But I don't know if the Pelicans care about that. They care about themselves. They want to get the best haul they possibly can. So I wrote last week that Boston is the team that should get him. I would not be surprised if they do. I can't imagine another team like the Clippers or Brooklyn coming in at this point. So Boston or LA Lakers would be the bets. Which one you want to take is up to you.
Yeah, I think it's going to be Boston. You hit some of it with it's all going to come down to the package that they offer that they're willing to give up for Anthony Davis. They have more first-round picks that they can give up than the Lakers can. They have better prospects, in my opinion, and in our opinion, than the Lakers have to give up. They can put together a better overall package than pretty much any other team right now based on picks and prospects. New Orleans wants picks and prospects. They don't want veteran players or players long in the tooth, as they say. They want other younger players that are able to build a team around Holiday and Zion. That's their goal right now. With that said, you can't, when you logically look at it, nobody else can compare it to what Boston can offer. Whether or not he signs with them long term is a whole nother debate, which Boston's probably trying to take into consideration. But for New Orleans, who cares? Get rid of him. He doesn't want to stay. You're trying to build around your future franchise player now with Zion. You can get good talent back. In fact, if they took the Boston deal, which prospects and draft picks that, depending on which deal you're looking at, the rumors that are out there, their team would be better with that package than if they kept Anthony Davis. You have to go with Boston.
I agree. They're picking at 14, 20, and 22 in the first round. The Lakers do have the number 4 pick, so that is kind of depends on what New Orleans is kind of weighing as far as the first round picks go. or whether they just want to pick twice in the top 5, or if they're cool with taking 2 of the or 3 picks in the middle. The only long shot that really jumps out to me is the Knicks, but it would take a lot of things to happen. Basically, if Durant were to re-up with the Warriors far enough ahead of the draft, and Davis still has not been moved, the Knicks are the type of team I could see doing something really stupid. They're picking at number 3. I could see this being like a Herschel Walker trade, where it's just going to be like they're going to go this year's first, next year's first, 2 years from now is first, and every player we have on our roster that you want to move down, and we'll pay for their moving, and we'll also give you courtside seats for the season. Ringside for the Rangers. No one wants to actually see the Knicks, but it's like that's the only thing. They're plus 1,000 from BetOnline, but Boston, LA, it's got to be one of those two, especially if the deal is made ahead of the draft. I mean, Durant, could throw a wrench in there, like I said, but the other teams are on there. I mean, New Orleans, unless they held on to him through the trade deadline. They're plus 600 at Bovada to just hold him through opening day. I'd have to double check the phrasing of their prop, but I don't know if he has to technically be on the court or just on the roster opening day. But New Orleans could be let's draft the guy. Let's draft first overall, and then let's see if you like it. And then, again, hold him hostage for a year. Plus 600 I'm with you guys. I think that if Boston is yet to be deterred by being told flat out that Davis is not going to re-sign with you in a year, then the Celtics seem like they would be a decent pick at plus 150. The Lakers plus 300 at BetOnline, though also not too shabby.
I mean, look at Toronto with Kawhi Leonard and Oklahoma City with Paul George. Like, all the rumors said that these guys weren't going to come back after one season, and those teams still made the trade. Paul George re-signed. Kawhi Leonard seems fairly likely at this point to re-sign. We don't know, but
yeah,
I think that might embolden a team like the Celtics or whoever else to step it up and try to get Anthony Davis, because you never know what will happen once he's actually there. If he goes to Boston and they win the title or they get to the finals, is he going to leave? I don't know. You never know.
Yeah. If they do what the Raptors did this year, anything's possible. Everyone loves some easy money. So, Rick, what is your easy money lock of the week this week?
I debated it a little bit, and I have to go with something you and I have talked about off air, and that is the CM Punk prop bet. If he's going to show up for All Elite Wrestling on August 31st at their All Out pay-per-view, because it's in his backyard. You and I both believe that he will not, and we'll go into that in more detail on our payoff episode this week. But with that said, I feel like after I looked at the whole betting landscape, the different events that I cover, not looking at golf, I can't think of something that has a better chance other than taking like Tyson Fury at minus 6,000 to win. I'm going with CM Punk minus, what was it? It was plus 155 or 150. Yeah, plus 150 to not show up. Yeah. That's crazy. To me, that's the easy money for me of this week.
Taylor, what's your pick this week?
So last week I said that the American women would cover a 4.5 goal spread against Thailand. They would have covered a 12.5 goal spread in the end. They're back in action on Sunday against Chile. 4-goal favorites here. Chile lost their first match against Sweden 2-0. The spread's even smaller here. Chile doesn't look like a viable threat. 4 goals, again, is a lot for soccer, but this is a different animal than your standard soccer match. So just going to go back to the American women and say they cover a 4-goal spread, and you can also take the over on 4.5 for the game. So a lot of goals are coming again this week.
Opposite of that, clear as mud. The game, fight, or event seems so unpredictable, we're keeping clear away from any betting on it. Taylor, there's no Stanley Cup playoffs to go with this time. So quickly, what is your pick for this week?
We have the Copa America starting this week. Brazil is the favorite. Argentina is still in it. This is a lot more competitive than the North American version, the Gold Cup. Colombia is involved. Uruguay is another quality team. There are so many good teams at the top that I'm not overly confident. Brazil's the favorite. Understandably, it's Brazil. But they've come up small in recent tournaments, notably the World Cup last summer. There are enough quality teams and enough quality players to where I think it's kind of a mess. Betting on it later in the tournament, once we have more clarity, is probably advised. So at this point, I would steer clear of betting on Copa America for now.
Rick, what do you got?
I was going to start off with the Criterium de Dauphiné, the race that's going on right now for cycling in France. It's basically the warm-up for the Tour de France. With Froome out, it changed the whole landscape of the race, as it did with the Tour de France. I would stay away from that right now. They're going into the hardest mountain stages that are left of this race. It's up in the air who's going to take over as the race favorite with them out. And I also would stay away from any future bets of the Tour de France right now until the dust clears some after this Criterium race and after we get a better idea of who's going to be on who's going to replace Froome for his team.
It's that time of the podcast where a cameo from Cuba Gooding Jr. would just be totally awesome, and that is because it is time for Show Me the Money! Lines, where we look ahead to this weekend's games and events and their current money lines. This might be the most fitting wager for Show Me the Money lines ever, as Justin Bieber has challenged Tom Cruise to an MMA fight for some reason. Bovada has a betting line available showing Cruise favorite at -155, the Biebs at +115 as an underdog. If this totally hypothetical, probably definitely isn't going to happen fight actually happened, who would you take, Rick?
First of all, I despise both of these guys. If I could, I'd fight them both at the same time. If I could pick a double knockout to end the fight, that's what I would pick as well. But at least with Tom Cruise, you can enjoy him in some movies. He was good in the movie Outsiders, but it was all downhill after that, which is probably before your guys' time. With that said, oh my God, oh my goodness, my heart, Elizabeth. Anyhow, with that said, there's nothing good about Justin Bieber. He doesn't have a good song. I can't stand his face. I hate all his haircuts. If I had to pick one guy, I would be rooting for Tom Cruise to win. But then again, I don't even know if he can beat Justin Bieber in a fight because he's like 5'2", and there's nothing masculine about him at all. Double knockout's my pick, or at the very least, I would like to fight both of them.
-110 odds on a 2-on-1 handicap match. -110 on both sides. Rick versus the team of Cruise and Bieber. Taylor, which way are you going?
So Tom Cruise is 31 years older than Justin Bieber, which is, I guess that's noteworthy. He seems like he's in pretty decent shape, but, age is undefeated. Justin Bieber at +115. I mean, I don't know. I'm sure neither of these dudes has ever gotten in a real fight in their entire life. I'm sure Justin Bieber hasn't. As many people probably have wanted to fight them both. I doubt it's actually happened. Is there a backstory here? Like, do we know why Justin Bieber is challenging Tom Cruise to a fight?
I have no idea. It just seemed to randomly happen on Twitter. I mean, as Twitter does, it just seems like this was a random Twitter fight, or something. But I don't even know if Cruise said anything or if they interacted in any way, or if Bieber was just like talking to his friend, like, yeah, I could totally take Tom Cruise.
Yeah,
like watching a Mission Impossible marathon with his buddies or whatever. I don't know.
I guess Tom Cruise is probably more learned in terms of combat just based on having to do action movies over the years. Not that necessarily translates to actual combat, but he can at least go through the motions, whereas Bieber surely has no skills whatsoever in that field. So I guess, I'm kind of talking myself into Tom Cruise here. It's just -155 is a pretty heavy favorite for a guy that's 56 years old, I believe. So if I were betting on it, I would just take the value, as much as it pains me on the Biebs.
As far as backstory background for each of these guys, Cruise, I believe, does most of all of his own stunts. So he is both athletic, and if you've seen some of the stunts from Mission Impossible that he's done, he's also crazy. Justin Bieber, I have seen play hockey, and the reason I saw that was because he got checked into the boards by, I forget who it was, but dude became my hero for a while after doing that. So I don't think Bieber is unathletic, but I think that Cruz is the more athletic. And I think that, again, breaking down a fight that isn't going to happen, the deeper into the fight it went, I think the more it would favor Cruz, because his cardio's got to be ridiculous from all of the running he does in all of his movies. As much as that's just like the joke about Tom Cruise that he always runs in his movies. But you combine that, like I would think Cruz would have the cardio advantage, and I think he's got the crazy advantage. So I'd go Cruz. In this totally hypothetical fight that is not going to ever happen, but if it does, it'll be gangbusters on pay-per-view. I'd pick Cruz at -155. I'm not actually going to bet on it because I don't think this is going to happen, but Cruz at -155 against Justin Bieber. God, I hope that happens. After a spectacular pay-per-view from UFC last weekend in actual MMA combat sports here, Bellator gets to take their turn this time around. Bellator 222 has the makings of a solid card. Rick and I previewed that on this week's edition of This Week in Combat Sports, which you can find on the YouTube channel. Main event features Rory McDonald taking on Neiman Gracie. McDonald lists as the favorite at -165. Gracie coming in at +135. Co-main event, Lyoto Machida favorite at -330. Compared to his opponent, Chael Sonnen, who comes in at +250. Rick, which of these underdogs would you rather take to pay off and pull the upset?
Well, I'd rather take Chael Sonnen if we're comparing underdogs here based on the odds. I think I've seen odds pretty much that you mentioned from Machida and Sonnen in that range. I've seen the odds closer, actually, on other sites for McDonald and Gracie. So depending on who you think you're going to bet on, you might want to do a little bit of line shopping there, some comparison to see if you can find Grace or McDonald at lower odds, because that 165 has gone up from, I saw it a couple days ago, it was 125. That's a big difference there. That can sway some people in terms of maybe not wanting to take as much of a chance with McDonald. But to your question, it has to be Chael Sonnen. As I talked about in our preview, or as our This Week in Combat Sports, Sonnen actually has a chance of winning this fight. If he can get this fight to the ground, he can grind it out. He is a superior wrestler than Machida. Machida's the better striker of the two. Win this fight, he can do what he did to Rampage and Silva, he can do to Machida if he gets Machida down to the mat. That's an if there. That's why the odds are in favor of Machida, because Machida's a dangerous striker with both his feet and his hands. And so Chael's going to have to try and get in there, close the distance, get a hold of him without catching something that's going to knock him out. That's the challenge with that. As far as the main event goes, Gracie, if he gets the fight to the mat, has a really great chance because he's an elite black belt in jiu-jitsu, Brazilian jiu-jitsu, as his last name suggests. That's royalty in MMA. McDonald is at least more capable on the mat than Gracie is standing up. So I still lean towards McDonald to win that. In regards to, return on investment, you have to go with Chael.
Taylor?
I just saw Phil Mickelson miss like a 2-foot putt. So that pick is not looking good right now. Yeah, just what Rick said. If I'm going to bet on a long shot like that, I'm going to take the guy with better value, or take the person with better value. That's Sonnen. I assume these are men we're talking about, but I honestly have no idea. So don't listen to me.
We're at the time of the podcast for a segment we just call Whoops, our chance to come clean about something we projected, predicted, or pushed that we were really, really wrong about, and to explain ourselves. So I'm going to go first, as always, to get us going here. And I'm just going to further what I said to open the show, which is that I very much, regardless of the outcome of this series, underestimated the Toronto Raptors. And they are a much better team than I had anticipated going in. They skinned their teeth against the Sixers. I thought that Philly was stood a good chance of pulling an upset there and picking up the series win there. I thought that, once they got going against Milwaukee, it was hard to see them stopping. But, the Bucks seemed like a clear-cut favorite. So respect to Toronto, to the Raptors, whether they win in Game 6, win in Game 7, or lose both. They are a much better team than I had thought going into the playoffs, and certainly have fared a lot better against the Warriors than I would have considered before the series started. So props to the Raptors on a very good series, regardless of the way that it finishes this weekend. Rick, what is your whoops of the week this week?
I think I've got a couple, and even though one of them really isn't my fault, I picked Chris Froome to win the Criterium de Dauphiné. That scary crash he had, it happens in cycling, but you don't predict that it's going to happen. You don't just say, hey, this guy's going to crash, so don't bet on him. So that could be a whoops there, even though I don't really want to take a full whoops, just a little one. I'm going to have to go to Michigan for NASCAR. Chase Elliott has done incredibly well in Michigan. 5.3 average finish in his 6 races. He had car issues almost the entire race. He was not any kind of threat to win the to win the flag at the end. Logano dominated the race. Even though you guys said Logano, I said that was still a good pick because this race was open for that. There was no clear-cut dominant favorite for this race. With that said, I'm going to go whoops with Chase Elliott. First time I've picked him to win, and I don't even know how long, and he made me look silly, and I'm not happy about that. In fact, I might want to challenge him to an MMA fight.
I'll have to come up with some betting odds for that one. It might take a little longer than the 2-on-1 handicap match. Taylor, what do you got for us this week? You can come clean now.
So the easy whoops would be picking the Bruins in the Stanley Cup final. Despite being given numerous opportunities to not do that, I continued to pick Boston. They failed. Didn't let me down because I wanted them to lose, but this is kind of a pre-whoops. So last week I was kind of bearish on the American women at the World Cup. I said there were better values with like France, England, Scotland if you want a super long shot, but one game in, that's not looking very good. France has been fine, but nowhere near as dominant as the Americans looked in the first game. So it's looking bad now. My pick to say the Americans won't win the World Cup. This could always end up being right, but I'm kind of calling my whoops a few weeks in advance here. So whoops on the American women potentially.
And if it doesn't end up being a whoops, you can whoops your whoops.
Yeah. This is a tangled web here. I'm starting to weave.
It would be a whoops within a whoops. It's a little late for an Inception reference.
Inception, yeah.
There you go. We're about to close the window here, so one last chance to get some things in. Closing line is set. We're looking for some final thoughts. So Taylor, other than like a recap of Inception, what do you got for us?
I'm going to go to soccer here. American women at the World Cup, Mexican men at the Gold Cup. And I'm going to take Uruguay as an underdog to win Copa America. So American women, Mexican men, Uruguayan men. All soccer bets to take.
Say Uruguay underdog 10 times fast. That one sounds like it.
That'll be a
right there. There you go. It's Father's Day weekend this weekend. I'm pretty excited. I'm a father myself. So I'm looking forward to enjoying the weekend with the family. I'm looking forward to some of the combat sports that we're going to have. We got the World Boxing Super Series this Saturday, which are the 2 semifinal matchups for the Cruiserweight tournament. I love tournaments. I love when they put some of the best people in a tournament to fight against each other. I'm excited for Bellator. I think there's some good matches there. I always root for Bellator to do well. But I absolutely hate the fact with some of their booking for the lineup, you put a world title, bantamweight title match as the opening fight for your card. It's almost like you don't even care about the title. Then you have somebody in there who's fought one time. He's 1-0, taking on someone who's 3-2, who hasn't fought in almost a year, who's basically a bum, as they said in Rocky. He's a bum. He's a bum. Like, he's a lump. The fight shouldn't even be happening, and it definitely shouldn't be on the main card. And I'm just getting started. I just was thinking about it as we were talking about it here. First of all, it kills me you guys don't even know what Outsiders is. You need to go watch that movie this week, and it is a classic.
Kevin Nash and Scott Hall, the outsiders?
No, close enough, though. Tom Cruise, Rob Lowe, Emilio Estevez, Patrick Swayze, Ralph Macchio, C. Thomas Howell. Great book.
Wow, what an all-star cast.
Yeah, great book, great movie. Came out in the early 80s. With that said, I was just thinking, they can't pick anybody worse to play Batman. And then we talked about Justin Bieber. The only thing worse than Mr. Twilight himself is if we had Justin Bieber as Batman. That would be horrible. That would be like life-changingly bad. In fact, the fact I'm even thinking about it hurts me. I hope Tom Cruise beats up Justin Bieber. I wish I could fight Justin Bieber. That's it.
The little golf clap for Rick on that one. He is exhausted himself, and we are done here as well, because that's going to do it for this edition of the Odds On Favorites podcast. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe to the Odds On Favorites YouTube channel, and check out gamblingsites.org for plenty more from these guys here. They're Taylor Smith and Rick Rockwell. I'm Drew Goldfarb. We'll see you next time.